classical music we're starting with
You mentioned the waving the head.
there. Honestly, if I did my hair right, I get a mad conductor thing going, I think. All right, what is up, guys? We are live here. It is, and you're seeing EMac waving his arms like a Muppet for the 1 minute here. So, what a way to start the late slate swap and sweat, where we're doing all the things here that you got to do after a main slate. We've got one showdown game tonight: Washington Wizards, LA Lakers. We're going to talk about that. We're also going to talk about our lineups as we go, and we're going to discuss everything that you need to know and that we're feeling emotionally for today's slate. I'm Chris Spags, joined by a man you know, you love him. He's your old pal, EMac. How you doing, EMac?
I'm doing good. I'm going to be sad when our shows start tailing off here because I'm not going to do more of the Friday shows. But good to reconnect with you. It's been a lot of fun, Chris. And these late night shows have turned into something quite interesting. I think we've been able to bring a different perspective that is not often talked about with actual living examples at hand. And that for me has made the whole swapping lineups and late slate changes just that much more real, because when it's a thought exercise, you're like, oh yeah, I can do it. And then you're staring at it going, what do I do? What do I do? Now I kind of know what to do on a lot of these. We can talk about a few we did tonight or maybe didn't do.
Yeah, I think there are some things to hit on, but let's get a plug out the way. First of all, smash the like button, guys. Here, this is a show that we're doing 5 days a week. So even when there's just a one game situation like today, we're gonna be on here. We're gonna be talking. We're gonna be hanging out. Normally, I'm not drinking today, so that's you got that going for us, I guess. But
it's
besides
National Margarita Day, Chris. My wife and I each had a margarita with our dinner, so we therefore split approximately one like actual cup of tequila. Woo! Party time.
Also, party EMac. You should have. I guess you couldn't wear a sombrero now.
I'm your Olay pal, EMac, right now.
I actually did know that today because the girlfriend mentioned it at some point, but she usually doesn't drink on Mondays. Actually, she doesn't drink for like the first half of the week before the weight of the world crashes down on her. But I was thinking about it. I was like, yeah, honestly, if there's ever a reason to have a margarita here, Margarita Monday, National Margarita Day. Yeah. I hope somebody at home is pounding tequila right now, like your old pal was about a half hour ago.
Oh, hang on. They might not be able to hear us here. Let's see.
Oh, they can't hear? Oh.
I don't know. One person said. No, I think they can.
Okay, good. That's all you can hear. Yeah. Hopefully. All right. Well, anyway, so
I'll test it real quick.
The audio's also been pounding some tequila, so that's what matters. But we appreciate you guys tuning in. Come back every day. We have new shows every day, and you'll find me here a lot of days with me and my late slate pals, EMac, Eric Lindquist, Greg Ehrenberg, all the guys here that you enjoy on Awesemo's channel will be here alongside me to make it palatable. EMac, let's talk about the main slate here, as we always do. The opening remarks, where sometimes we got to tilt a little, sometimes we got to, I guess, victory lap the things we got right. And it does seem like this slate, there were some things to get right, including Chicago Bulls, where we do have Kobe White rebounding out of his mind. Wendell Carter, I just saw at 30 fantasy points, over 30 fantasy points without a lot of game played there. EMac, how heavy were you on the Bulls? Because it does seem like we may have some very integral Bulls in this Rockets Bulls game. That was the first one on the slate.
I'm looking a little bit, and hang on, they're working on the volume, guys. We got it. Just we're changing some of the background tech on the fly. We'll take care of it. These are working the kinks out, and this is what we got to do. We're putting on 10, 11 hours of shows for you guys per day. We've had to add more producers because we're wearing them out. We're wearing
the fun
them out.
Never ends here on the Awesemo YouTube channel, as I always say.
No, but I wanted to check the bet. Eric Lindquist did his prop of the day was over 3.5 assists, and it was for one of the Bulls, and I'm trying to remember who it was. I think
was it for Satoransky?
No, I think it was for Kobe White, and he's at one right now at halftime. So some sites were 3.5, some were 4.5, and you could take the over or under on those. Of course, we were looking at the odds on Odd Shopper, so that works works out in our favor. But I just wanted to check that one. I did bet the Ben Rossa Kendrick Nunn more than 13.5 earlier this week, so I didn't have a chance to get anything down on this one. I just wanted to check that out. But to answer your question, clearly not enough Bulls here. I'm usually go under the field on Wendell Carter Jr. and just accept the fact that 1 out of every 10 games when he has a good one, I'm going to take it in the teeth. I'm fine with that. Sort of my approach with Kevin Porter Jr. or probably Michael Porter Jr. It'd be easy with Kevin Porter Jr. because he's not playing, but Michael Porter Jr. as just 10 games out of 78, he scored more than 39 DK points. I survived again last night going onto the field at some point, taking a teeth. Same thing I do with Shetty Osman. So Wendell Carter Jr. for me, I think he's an okay player. There's just so much uncertainty with him. He's a guy I tend to go away with because at the beginning of the season, he was on some wild stretch of like 20 games where he didn't top 25 fantasy points, reaching back to last year. And his points per minute were just not great. So he's been dealing with the myriad of injuries here. So he's someone that, again, hey, he played 17 minutes, went 6 for 8, and he has a double-double right now because there are no bigs for Houston. I probably missed on that one, but that's an acceptable loss there.
Here's a question I have for you, EMac, because there's one guy that I didn't talk about at much length on Live Before Lock today. And it's honestly, it's sometimes a tough line for us to balance when we're hosting these shows where EMac, I know you do tend to be, you wear your heart on your sleeve with your DFS plays for the most part. And we all try to give people our takes and, mostly reflecting upon the top plays and how high owned plays, as Josh talked about today on Live Before Lock, how these plays get high owned is because they're good plays on paper. They look good for some reason. And one play that I didn't think looked great, but when I was running through rate data jumped out to me was David Nwaba, who's at 17.5 fantasy points at halftime. And he was a leading rebounder for Houston in court time without Christian Wood and without DeMarcus Cousins. And now within this half here where he only played 12 minutes, 8 points and 6 boards. He also has a steal and a 3, so that's going to help round things out. But this is, I think, a general question for you, Matt, because we do talk about some strategy here. And again, we'll dig deeper into the showdown. There's always so much you could talk about in a showdown with very high price studs. You're going to want to cram in there. So we will get to that towards the back half of the show. And obviously, pretty much as soon as we run out of things to talk about the main slate, we'll get there. But how often do you ignore your projections for the most part? Because Nwaba, I think even if you got really generous with rebound rates, even kept his usage rate up high enough, where not accounting for the fact that John Wall and Eric Gordon are going to shoot a bunch, I felt like Nwaba still couldn't quite get there for me. And I have him in some lineups, but not enough. And, a similar thing maybe for Wendell Carter for some people out there. But how much do you ignore those things, EMac, when you're going in or not ignore them? Like, are you willing to play a guy like Nwaba at 4,600 if he has like a 4.5x projection and isn't being fed to you by an optimizer that much?
So there's reaches a certain breaking point when teams are missing so many guys. The question really becomes, can they be a functional NBA unit or not? And we see it every now and then where the wheels just come off. This type of team may, even against inferior competition or less than league average competition, may only put up 85, 90 points, right? This is nothing new. It's just going to be one of the outcomes that's in play. I had so many other players from this game. I just wasn't particularly worried about getting to Nwaba. Now, I know you didn't say the keyword revenge, because this is, he did play for Chicago a couple years ago among 4 or 5 teams he's played for. But in all seriousness, so he's just not somebody I generally go to. And it's hard. I didn't know how the rotations were going to play out because he's in your buddy Danwell House and Eric Gordon. And so these guys are interchangeable. Even Jayshawn Tate, when he first popped up this year, he was, I wrote him up on for our DFS building blocks. He was point guard on one side, small forward on one side, and a power forward on one side. It's like they didn't know what to do with him. I think he's 6'6" or 6'7". He's like a PJ Tucker clone, except he has a handle. That's basically it, So it's one of those things where you're like, I at this point, I don't know what to do because these guys all seem interchangeable. They're probably going to, in my thought, was probably going to default to obviously John Wall and then maybe some of their other guys that have been there for a little bit. And I just didn't see Nwaba kind of being that guy. I thought he'd lose out to House. Personally, that was just my take on it. I have 1%, so I'm assuming that's where the default was. So usually when I do here's a lot of people like to hear how we approach Fantasy Cruncher or other optimizers. So usually what I do, because I got to work during the day, I upload our ownership projections. And then usually about an hour or 45 minutes before lock. And then from that point, I now go in and manually deciding, do I want to go above or below that? So in my exposure column, I start to go above or below that. I usually worry about the top 20 or so most popular, the top 20 so points per dollar plays, and the top 20 value plays, raw points plays. And at that point, I've generally touched probably about 45 or 50 people in the player pool where I've decided, am I going up or down? And then the rest of them all probably end up where Alex has us with those. And I just scan across the bottom because like tonight, Willie Cauley-Stein, Dwight Powell, I think Moritz Wagner, those guys were kind of low owned. I wasn't really excited to get to any of them until Porzingis was out. So sort of to answer your question, those guys were kind of coming out in the wash for me tonight because there were so many other decent plays that I wanted to get to. I didn't really have to go there. those were the kind of plays I would spend a lot of time tearing my hair out, pouring into details, trying to find something. About 3 or 4 years ago, where it seemed like we weren't always getting this breaking news until the last month or so of the season, that we weren't having all these out of nowhere injuries. And you kind of had to know those 8th, 7th, 8th, 9th guys in the rotation and who was going to elevate up based upon matchup, situation, etc. We don't seem to have to know that anymore. Now it's more, there's going to be someone showing up somewhere, and it becomes an exercise in math, as opposed to trying to figure out rotation or coach's tendency or whatever it might be.
Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, the minutes are going to be the most valuable thing you'll find in DFS as always. And I think one thing too that I've been struggling with a little bit more, and this is why I think it's important, whether you are directly playing Awesemo's projections or you're like me, where I make my own projections, but I use the minutes from Awesemo and I sort of cross check what I'm doing to make sure that I'm close enough to Awesemo's. Because for me as a host, like I know how many people use Awesemo's projections. A lot of them do. At the end of the day, it's all going to be about your lineup construction, how you build things, how you make it all work for you. But still, I feel like I have a little bit of an edge, sort of paying extra close attention to myself and trying to be just a fractional amount off of what the projections are for Awesemo for the most part in a given day, or even using an average. I do that sometimes too. And I think with the NBA this year, if you are a person who makes your own projections, there are just some weird things that I feel like are not normally the case in previous years, where you're getting such limited court time samples for some of these guys because you have so many injuries, so many health protocol rule outs. You're not getting the 100-minute samples even sometimes. You're not even getting, ideally you want 300 minutes or, like 500 minutes would be fantastic if you can get that to see how things look. And I think it feels like a bit of an edge, but also a bit of obviously DFS, a game of skill. We all know that from the legal things that were filed a couple of years ago, but there is a degree, I think, of luck to it, of just trying to figure out what the angle is, what you're pulling, what you're looking at when you're getting these rate data from an NBA Wowie or wherever you're getting it. And I think it's just something that struck me as interesting because I think there is a bit of an edge to trying to find those things now and figure out what they are, especially for teams like Houston, that there's just no historical precedent for what they do with no big man in the rotation. And I think there's something there. I don't know what exactly it is, but I do think it's something that I'd like to try to figure out a little bit more, because you can't ever ignore projections, but maybe you can sort of goose guys up a little bit more where you're making guesswork of small sample sizes.
Yeah, and that's one of the things that kind of looking at you have 3 options. You go below, you match, or you go above the field, right? Those are our 3 choices. And probably the worst one you can do is match the field on too many players. That just means you're not making stands anywhere, and you're going to be lucky to min cash unless you have some rare combination of whatever it is you're doing. But the other thing you have to be careful of is you don't want to go, you have to pick and choose your spots before you go way over people. If you just start relaxing the ceiling ownership caps on the best point per dollar plays and other stuff, you might as well just take them all off, and it becomes an exercise in projections, right? That's really not going to help you either, because you're going to have all the popular plays, because NBA is the most projectable sport. Because again, as you said, it's minutes is the first thing. So the thing I've learned is how to strategically go below somebody, and in cases without even really going below them, or go above the field, match it in my overall portfolio. But the way I'm using those particular players, part of a game stack, or maybe one from each side or something like that, to have more synergy or something like that can help me get everybody rowing in the same direction and put me over the top of separate people that have the same amount of the players, right? You're kind of, it's like getting a hit when someone's on base. That's better than getting a hit when nobody's on base, right? So that's, to borrow a baseball metaphor, because I know you try to work basketball into these all the time. I think I just hit a home run.
It's been killing me lately, EMac. I've been popping too many basketball metaphors in when talking basketball, and they just sound like some 1980s basketball tout talking on your hotline. But yeah, I think there's something interesting to it here. And this is, the kind of high level talk that we can do on this show that we don't have the leg room really to do on some of the other shows. But, I agree. Like I've actually had, as I've talked about on the shows, like a part of my process has been trying to iterate, trying to do different things and learn. And also, when things aren't running good, wondering where I could tweak along the edges. And exposures are a very crucial thing, where if you run a sorting process through Excel, like I do, like I ended up with 60% Tim Hardaway Jr. today. And that's not something I go in going like, yeah, I would love to have 60% Tim Hardaway, because that's just, taking a chalky play and going even higher on it is not necessarily the move, but that's what the lineups are telling me. That's what my top ranked lineups are, my lineups that don't have a ton of ownership on them. And I think that's, there's something that can be, honed hopefully with the process. And I think trying to get, little bits of tastes of guys like the Nawaba's guys. I think Wendell Carter was a fairly chalky play. So that's not one it was sneaky by any stretch, but trying to make sure that you're getting these guys in, at least, getting tastes of them if they are low owned, or getting close to the field if they are guys that you believe in who you're just not getting. I think it's a crucial part of DFS these days. And, it probably always has been, but I think now more than ever, really being cognizant of those things and leaning in on the good projections of the data and the angles that you see that maybe other people aren't seeing, I think is probably as important now more than ever.
Yeah, so like Wendell Carter is an interesting one. So he was one I said I went under on, and I think we must have had him projected for around 20 or 25%. That he came in at, I'm looking at the DK $8. I'm only playing on DK tonight, but I'm playing in all the sports tonight. So I set him for probably, I think whatever half was what we had. I ended up with 15%. So I got a little higher because I was running some Swaptimizer stuff, but I was isolating some of my lineups, which means I wasn't adjusting the overall everything. I was saying a lineup with this player can now have these percentages again. So that's going to increase your cap. So that's kind of what Chris is saying. So even if he has capped somebody at 40%, if he makes 1,000 lineups and then culls those down to 100, he may choose more than 40% of those 100 have a player on it. And that's how he got to 60% of Tim Hardaway Jr. Hardaway Jr. was the one where I said, 40%. I've been down this road before with Tim Hardaway Jr. He is 4,400. That feels good. I didn't know what to do. So I tried to match the field on him. So I landed on 37%. We had him projected for 42, I think it was. He came in at actually 30% on the DK $8. So I actually ended up kind of being above the field. Now I play in some lower dollar contests that aren't that aren't the 150 max. So these are directionally correct for what I'm looking for. But that to me, I'm a little bit surprised. I thought he'd be more popular at 4,400.
Yeah, no, I think that's fair. And, it's sort of trying to figure out, my sorting process is trying to figure out what the unifying themes are between lineups that are well projected or projected well enough, close enough to the optimal, and without, losing a little bit of ownership, trying to get a few guys in the mix who are less owned, trying to get, as I've talked about on the shows, trying to get the value plays in. I make rules where I have to get 2 value plays in as a minimum, guys at 4,500 or under, because that was one unifying theme I saw across, weeks of looking through Fantasy Cruncher Rewind and trying to see, like what's the unifying theme between the lineups. And it's, it's always an evolving process that you're always going to have the best foot forward by using Awesemo's data and all of that. But just something I want to, try to talk about a little bit more here, because it can be frustrating, I think, when you end up, like I ended up above the field on Kobe White, under on Wendell Carter. I don't know how that's going to help me. Like, is it good to get away from a guy who is higher owned, or is it going to be worse that I don't have Carter in the mix when he's probably, on this slate in particular, the center play you need to have? And it's always going to be a moving target in DFS, but I think now more than ever, especially on nights where, a week where you've lost Steph Curry and Draymond Green in 50% of your lineups, that's you're all digging out a hole at that point, like I've been.
Yeah. And what I found on those, I would call those like a catastrophic event, right? You get a 0 or basically a 0. On those nights, even if I have those players, I tend to do better than the field, even if I have those players at a similar rate to the field, because of how I build my lineups and how I have a larger player pool. I tend to find somebody that can break free and salvage my night. It doesn't mean I cash or min cash a bunch of them, but I usually have a good chance of getting something that's going to get me at least close to break even. Last night on the Sunday night slate, it was Nemanja Bjelica. We didn't know that Rashawn Holmes was going to play. All of a sudden he's going to play. There's only one game left. And I had like 70% Bjelica. I had 70% Whiteside. I tried to knock some of those guys back, go to somewhat to Holmes, but I still had like 7 to 10% of Bjelica. He took a 0. DNP. He didn't come off the bench.
I hated that so much. That was him and Corey Joseph, both 2 guys I thought would be low owned and sneaky, and nope, they just barely played or did nothing.
Right. I ended up making 63% last night because I lucked into one lineup that happened to be in a winner take all that I usually don't play. And so instead of me making 13%, I made 63%. It was like, okay, well, those are the nights where you're like, I can't congratulate myself on that. That was just dumb luck. So people were saying in chat, you do a good job of talking about luck and building lineups, et cetera. This is the same thing as me getting angry over something I can't control. Right? I couldn't control the Bjelica. It didn't go out. It didn't seem to hurt me last night. Now, what do we learn from this? 1, I got lucky on the high end, but 2, I should have thought in a little deeper and realized, 1, Luke Walton is an idiot coach, and I used to like him too, but he's frustrating me now. And 2, Bjelica didn't play for a full month. He was a DNP for an entire month. shouldn't be a surprise that he goes back to it, especially now that Jabari Parker is finally played in his second game last night this season. So I probably should have read the tea leaves a little more on that. That to me led me to tonight to say, you know what, Willie Cauley-Stein's not starting. I have a bunch of him. I don't know if it's right or wrong, but I'm going to get him out of my lineups for the most part. And that's something I've been talking with Eric Lindquist on the late shows and in Slack a lot about this, because he's sort of teaching me how to apply these things. And he was like, oh yeah, I got rid of entirely Willie Cauley-Stein. I'm like, oh, well, maybe I should do that too, because he knows what he's doing, right? So it's learning how to do those things. Was that the right decision? I don't know. Ask me in 90 minutes. We'll find out. But
yeah, I get it fully. And it's, and it's funny too, because I don't think it was a show we did together. It might've been Friday's show actually, but I forget when it was, but you mentioned Jabari Parker being back in the rotation. And I was like, oh, it's interesting. Like, good for him. He's back in the rotation. And I didn't think like, oh yeah, he's back in the rotation. And now they have less reason to play Bielitsa because they don't want to play him. Like when he was out earlier in the year, he was out for personal reasons. And I think also had a back issue.
First he was injured, then he had personal, and then he got on the health and safety protocol. It's just like, poor guy, he can't play.
Yeah, and Walton had said something to the effect of like, we don't view his role the same way. And like, it basically seemed to be portending that Bielitsa would be on his way out of town at some point, or they would, whatever the case may be, whether they release him or trade him. And instead it's just like, no, they just don't want to play him. He's not a priority guy in their organization. And Jabari Parker, I guess, is for right now. So just, things to keep in mind here. And the fun of these late slates is sometimes things go askew, even when we know all the information. And I guess we could talk a little bit more about the Showdown, EMac. And, normally on these shows, we have a Swaptimizer segment. And at this point, for the most part, you're probably locked in to whatever your construction is. Unless you got multiple Lakers, then maybe, I guess, you could try going over to Washington's side if you're trying to dig out of that hole. But EMac, let's sort of take this as a thought exercise, because I think for the most part, people are going to be locked into their construction. But let's say somebody out there has LeBron. They also have Harrell. They also have Kuzma. And I think that's something that, maybe you can swap over to a Westbrook or Beal, who don't project that well, but who do have, some sort of ability to spike an upside in a tournament. Would you make that move at all if you were desperate right now? You have some of the bad chalk out there, whatever that may be to varying people. Like, would you want to maybe consider getting away from LeBron, or would you just ride with LeBron and hope that he guides you to the cash line?
So I think LeBron I think we've had him projected as probably the number one guy. I've got my late slate stuff in here, but I'm suspecting he was, let me rephrase this. Of the high dollar people, he was the more popular guy. Yes, the John Walls and some of those other guys were going to be there, but they're already locked. So we're only looking at those who aren't locked. So of everybody who's left, he's going to be probably have the combined popularity of what Westbrook and Beal do. Do they all and Adam says this well, do they all have the same ceiling? Yeah, probably. And the tougher the matchup, and I think maybe Greg says it too, the tougher the matchup just means it's harder for them to get there. It doesn't mean they can't get there. And that's something that's important to understand. So if you are just, to borrow the poker phrase, by the way, I've never played poker outside of a home game. To borrow a poker phrase, if you're drawing dead, good sir, it's time to pull out everything but the kitchen sink. That's a nice pivot where you can probably go to Beal or Westbrook, because LeBron is either going to be in your utility or potentially a guard spot on DK. And then from there, you can upgrade. If you have one other player, you can now upgrade away from what is probably one of the lesser Lakers, who are a whole bunch of question marks. And maybe you can get up to that next level where you might have somebody that's going to play some minutes, which could be a Kyle Kuzma. So let's kind of talk about the players there. So, because I broke these guys down in the DFS building blocks article, so I've got all the notes here. So I said NBA Wowie shows that Kyle Kuzma typically will be in line for 0.86 fantasy points per minute, regardless of who is on or off the court right now. So his key to success is he'll get less efficiency when he's on there with LeBron, but he makes up for it in minutes because he's actually starting and he's going to get an extra rotation. So that kind of helps him. DK preemptively priced him up. He's like 6,700, I think there. He's 57 on FanDuel, 18 on Yahoo. That's a little more realistic there. Montrezl Harrell is still going to come off the bench, but he's going against a bunch of Wizards that really don't have a center outside of Robin Lopez, who they're going to play 18 to 20 minutes. Then it's going to be Moritz Wagner, Rui Hachimura, Davis Bertans, etc. So that kind of bodes well for him, because he can out hustle those guys. And when they go out to the 3-point line, he doesn't care, because he's just going to be chasing out towards them, and then he'll just be ahead of them, getting the rebound on the other closer to the basket. So I think those are the two guys that you can kind of say, if I drop down from to Westbrook or Beal? Can I get up with whatever my other player is to one of those two? The other guys are all a mess. Caruso, we don't know what's going to happen. He's going to play all the minutes LeBron's off the court. That's almost assured because he's the only other true ball handler on the team. After that, we're not sure. He can play next to LeBron. He closes a lot of times, even when it's LeBron and Davis. But we saw the last two games, it was KCP and Wesley Matthews. So here's a question. How many times do you think Wesley Matthews has topped 25 fantasy points in his 27 games this year?
I would go, it's got to be at least one in there, but I would.
Well, the last game was one.
Okay, so that's it?
Okay. No, how many more? So two.
Oh.
He played 69 games, nice, last year for Milwaukee. How many times do you think he topped 25 fantasy points?
For Milwaukee last year?
Got to be some blowout run. Maybe he got lucky and hit some threes, right? It's just 25 fantasy.
It's got to be like 5, I think.
5. So basically,
I knew that all along. Of course, I was.
Basically, in his last 95 games, he's done it 7 times. Wesley Matthews exists to stand in the corner, shoot threes, and swing the ball around. That's it. But he was hitting his shots, so he got to close. You got KCP, who's averaging 0.67 fantasy points per game or per minute. So that's, he just kind of is what he is. So I like Caruso and KCP. KCP because he's going to start. He should close. Caruso because he's going to get those minutes that LeBron is not playing, and he can play alongside him, and he should close. So I like those guys. But then wild card, Talon Horton Tucker. I can never say that poor kid's name right. This will be the 34th NBA game he has played in 2 seasons. Do we feel good about that? And by the way, he's probably the 3rd best ball handler on the team right now with Dennis Schroeder out. So these are the guys we're talking about, and it doesn't get any prettier when we go over to the Washington side. So that's where if you can get up to that, maybe you roll the dice on Bertans, hope he splashes some threes. Maybe you can get to Rui Hachimura. He should flirt with a double-double tonight. Maybe you get to, Harrell or Kuzma. Those would be the arguments for any of them. But is there a certainty outside of LeBron, Russell Westbrook, UCLA? By the way, you should know that. Come on.
I think
guy back to and they're playing a back-to-back. They're playing in LA tomorrow too, or they're playing against the Clippers tomorrow.
It's a lot of games coming up tomorrow too. So hopefully the late slate show will be a little more active with things to talk about there. But I just feel like to close the loop on the swaptimizing process, I do think moving off of LeBron, if you have the roster spots and going to Westbrook, who Alex has a really nice projection on. I wasn't quite there. I'm actually a little bit concerned at how lowly I have Westbrook and Beal compared to Alex's projection, where on DraftKings, he's got Westbrook at 51.7, at Beal 47.6. I think trying to get to those guys and then maybe taking Harrell, who's single digit owned on the main slate, would be the move. Harrell to me projects really well. I think he looks like a solid play who was kind of underappreciated with the main slate ownership. But I think really at this point, if you are drawing dead, like EMac was saying before, I think getting off of LeBron and going to one of these guys, going to one of the stars from Washington is the move. And, it's a low outcome move where you're not doing that. But if you are, somehow trying to get different and find a way to the cash line or find a way above all the LeBron lineups, I feel like just coming off LeBron and spending that money somewhere else would be the wisest move.
I see someone in chat saying KCP guarding Beal or Westbrook, he's going to foul out by the 3rd quarter. KCP for his career, his per 36 foul rate is 2.3. He's not going to foul out. He's not going to play defense either, but he's not going to foul out.
Yeah, I think it's interesting to talk about those things, but for the most part, obviously everybody always sweats those things more. And, really the guys you have to worry about fouling out are
Moritz Wagner in this same game. He has a high per 36.
Yeah. And it's like,
sell me on that one.
If things get weird with one of these guys, I think that's something that can happen, but you're playing narrow outcomes. And if you don't go to KCP in a showdown, especially, where you have to find Lakers value, you have to find value overall. Like there are reasons to not play KCP. I think he'll be higher owned in the showdown. But that's sort of like, that's the reason you don't play him. It's not because you're worried about foul trouble.
Moritz Wagner, his per 36 for his career, 5.9. This year at 6.4. Last year it was 6.6. You foul out with 6. Who's he going to be going against? Potentially LeBron in the post or Marc Gasol.
Yeah,
advantage not Wagner, that's for sure.
I would agree with that, though. Wagner, having the ability to start and maybe earn more minutes. I think Adam had talked about on the deeper dive earlier. I guess we could start to talk the Showdown a little bit more, because Wagner is a player that, theoretically could earn more run and could also see just an opportunity to do it. Like, I think, again, I don't always mean to steal Adam's thoughts, but sometimes he'll say things that I'm like, that's actually a very good point, and one that I would like to use. So give full credit to the delicate genius of Ship My Money DFS, of course. But I do think that Wagner, if you're look for a player on even the Showdown slate, or even if you're trying to, swap optimize a little because you're desperate to find something different with your lineups, looking how they are, going to Wagner doesn't seem like the worst thing in the world. And I couldn't bring myself to do it in the usual 2 lineups I put into the big tournament on DK today. But I feel like going to Wagner is something that people won't be comfortable with. But for a Showdown in particular, I think getting Wagner in is an interesting move, because he's so productive. He's a point per minute guy, and there's a chance that he just earns himself more court time, or there's also a chance he completely plays himself off it, as he's done many times.
All right, I have the perfect lineup on DK.
Okay, do you want to give it out to everybody for free?
Absolutely, because if you play this one with me, you're going to be crazy. So let's put Wagner at captain. Why not? He's got a realistic shot at a double-double. We'll give him that. When he's out there, he's incredibly productive. The rest, did I closed this page, but he does have some pretty good rebounding per 36 rates. I think you go James, LeBron, that would be the same player, LeBron James, Russell Westbrook, Bradley Beal, and now I have like 2,400 per person. So I'm going to go Caldwell Pope, and not Wesley Matthews, but his brother from another mother, Garrison Matthews. Garrison Matthews cut from the same cloth as Wesley Matthews, more or less. He shoots, he doesn't score, he gets yanked out of the game. He starts, here's his minutes the last few games: 12, 17, 12, 20, and 25. Those were all starts, by the way. We like to call those the ceremonial starts, but there is no Ish Smith, so he's kind of there. We have Howell Neto coming off the bench. You want to play the big 3? This is the tax. You got to play 3 crappy players. Let's hit enter.
Yeah, what guys would you be comfortable getting to play the big 3? Because I was trying to get there with Harrell as captain, and I think for me the issue with playing LeBron, Westbrook, and Beal on the Showdown is that you're giving away too much a captain right away. Like, you're giving away. I mean, I couldn't get to Harrell. I think you have to get to like a KCP captain, a Caruso captain. You have to get really weird here. And I just don't know that I see top 1% or top 1 overall play, even accounting for the fact that like Caruso doesn't have to outscore LeBron. He just has to score enough to make himself viable at captain. And then also Beal, Westbrook, and LeBron have to score enough to get there. But how crappy are you willing to go at captain, EMac? Because this is a slate where it does feel uncomfortable to not have the 3 stars. I think you definitely need to have at least 2 of them in the mix, whether it be 1 at captain or 2 in the utility, or 1 at the captain, 1 at utility, or 2 at utility. But what cheap guys are you willing to get to? And is there one who I think at captain you could actually see playing in order to try to jam in LeBron and Westbrook and Beal?
It's Wagner. I don't see any way around it. If you go Caruso and then the other 3, you have 2,600 per. So we're looking at guys. Okay, Troy Brown Jr. God, when was the last time he hasn't played in a week. You have Jerome Robinson, who's played 1 minute and 2 minutes in each of the last 2 games. Markieff Morris, he is familiar with nobody left on this roster outside of Bradley Beal, I think. However, he has played 17 and 10 minutes, 18 and 10 in his last 4 games. I do need to point out that he has made buckets in 1 of those games. He was 3 for 5. In those other 3 games, he was 0 for 10 combined. I don't think he cares. Tonight, he might register with him that he used to play for the Wizards at some point, maybe through the haze that is Markieff Morris. Keith Chief, he manages to get 15 fantasy points, but I don't know. It's getting pretty scary. I think the move is to not play Westbrook. It's to go with James and Beal.
Interesting. So that's the way you're getting different right away. And the Showdown ownership is available on Awesemo. It was updated an hour ago, but probably won't be moving around too much here because barring some weird injury that would probably ruin everything on the main slate and this one, you're probably going to see these guys get in where they're supposed to. Westbrook going to be 55% owned overall. He's also the second highest owned captain. LeBron's going to be the highest owned captain by a wide margin. But EMac, I'm putting you on the spot here. You're making your claim here. You're saying that you would play Beal over Westbrook, accounting for, I mean, it's a 6% difference in ownership, so it's not crazy, but it is enough, and you're getting a slightly cheaper player.
My only thought is by doing this is it is the first night of a back-to-back. It is LA. I'm sure he's angling to play, even though there are no fans in the stands. It's Westbrook. He's been angling to play against former teams as the Wizards have faced him, etc. I could see him wanting to play back-to-back. He did play back-to-back in the last set, but they didn't run him into the ground the first night. If this ends up being a non-winnable game for the Wizards, by the way, they've won their last 4 despite allowing 121.2 points in those 4 games. I could see them saving him for tomorrow, but tomorrow's not an easier matchup either. It's against the Clippers, right? So my thought would be maybe if anybody had minutes upside capped tonight, it would be him. The flip side of that is maybe they're like, yeah, tomorrow's a sunk cost. We're going to try to win tonight against the depleted Lakers squad. You're playing 37 minutes. So that's kind of your sort of both sides of the coin on that one. But he's $400 more, $500 more. Westbrook is. Do you think more people will go to him, or will they take that discount on Beal?
The ownership right now has Westbrook getting more. So I think the assumption is that people will take the slightly higher projection and the guy who does a little more peripherally. So I do think I'll tell you what I did in my 2 lineups is I have actually, let me just double check this. I think I went with Chalk LeBron at captain, but let me just make sure, because I was playing around before the show and then got distracted. No, so I have Harrell at captain in both. So that's my way of getting different right away. Harrell at captain, to me, doesn't have the upside, doesn't have the ceiling of LeBron, but I think he allows you to afford most of the other core plays. And it's about the ownership product too. Harrell's going to be a 5.5% owned captain. So when you put all the numbers together, going to a guy like really going to Harrell, going to Horton Tucker, going to Caldwell Pope, going to Kuz at captain or Caruso, like these guys are all single-digit ownership compared to LeBron, who's going to be almost half the field will have him at captain. Westbrook also going to be very highly owned at captain. Beal also going to be right there, right behind Westbrook. So in my 2 lineups, I have Harrell at captain, and I have one of Westbrook and then one of Beal in the other lineups, because I think that's the way to approach it. But is there a world, EMac, where you'd fade LeBron? It's because it was just a thought exercise question. I'm not advocating to fade LeBron, but would you fade LeBron here, EMac? And if it meant getting Westbrook and Beal and immediately getting different from 86% of the lineups?
So we'll make a third one. So here's the second one. I went with Caruso at the top, and then I went James, Beal, Hachimura, Pope, and then I have 5,700 left. So I said, you know what? I'm going to go Marc Gasol. I'll take the 20 minutes. I hope maybe he lucks into a double-double. Fine, whatever. But I have 700 left. I'm assuming other people are now going to say, oh, I can go get Westbrook. I don't want to leave 700 on the table. I'm going to go spend 200 on Westbrook. So I'm not. I'm curious to see how that one plays out. And then let's build one without LeBron. So if we're going to go without LeBron, my thought here would be, what is our best option, do you think? Do you think it is to go with a Laker at the top who would perform well if LeBron is performing mediocre? Or do you think we should pick one of our Washington Wizards up top?
So I think, really we're talking about not playing LeBron as just an example of what.
So not playing him at all on our roster, not even in the flex, right? That's where we're going with this. And I'm fine with it.
Yeah. I mean, I'm honestly probably not fine with it, because I just don't see how in this spot he doesn't go off. I'd be much more inclined to take one of the Wizards instead. But the way that he doesn't have the day that he needs to have, I think, is Caruso having a big day. So maybe he's in the mix for captain, I guess. But then if you're getting him a captain, you're going to put LeBron in anyway. I just think overall, you're probably going to want more LeBron than not. But the way that LeBron doesn't get there is if Kuzma has a good day, Caruso has a good day, Harrell has a good day, and maybe like one of Caldwell Pope or Horton Tucker have a good day. And even with that, like I still think it's Harrell at captain probably. But yeah, I think it's just got to be like all the guys who get assists and points somehow do that without LeBron, and he just kind of lays back and hangs out. And that's a very low probability outcome, but I think that's the only outcome that could happen where LeBron doesn't get in, at least as a utility spot.
What did we have for and yes, people are calling for money time. Well, we're telling you some of these projections.
I forgot to flip the hat.
Yeah.
We were talking, I was doing things, but yeah, money time. Here we go. And I think our pal Chris doesn't even have the cash register sound here. He's so new, so we don't. It's not an official money time, but it is. It's money time enough for us. So yeah, we're flipped here. Back to the dollar signs.
So let's think about this. So what are Beal and what are Westbrook? Let's pick one of them as our captain. How popular is Westbrook?
Westbrook is under 15% owned at captain.
Oh, okay. So perfect. So I'm going to take Westbrook and Beal. We're not playing LeBron.
Okay. I'll do this. I'll build it at the same time as you. We could see what we both come up with. So then you're going to put in, I think you have to immediately put in Kuzma would be the first one I would put in.
It's either Kuzma or Harrell, and it turns out that we're going to now be playing scrubs again. So whenever you're putting one of the big three guys in there, you're going to be playing scrubs. So here's the question. Who do we think has a better shot at an upside amongst the Rui Hachimura, who at least scores and rebounds, Davis Bertans, who can get hot from three, but he's only had one really big game this year after being so good last year, but he's coming off injury and he's coming off being out of shape and some other stuff? Or is it Harrell, who can kind of do a little bit of everything? And in 24 minutes in this last game, he put up 37 DK points. He had 18 points and 10 boards against Miami. So let's put in Harrell and let's see what that does for us. So if we go Harrell, Beal, still you could go Westbrook. And then now you got to play some scrubby Lakers. You can put in Caruso, KCP. Now we got 4,900. So now we're looking at someone like Halzino Neto, who I'm not really excited about. We're back to Wagner. I'm also not really excited about. So maybe we play one more anti-LeBron. Would that be Taylor Horton Tucker maybe? But see, the problem with this is if LeBron's sitting because somehow the Wizards are up, if the Wizards are up big, I don't know that they play Westbrook, right? So maybe we don't have Westbrook in here.
See, but then we're not playing Westbrook, so it defeats the purpose of not playing LeBron.
Entirely.
Yeah.
Which is interesting.
So even if you put Caruso at captain, so I put Caruso at captain under the theorem that I had earlier, where you put him at captain, he assists really well. He sets up all the other guys. LeBron just lays back, doesn't do as much today. Still probably putting up 40 fantasy points at least. Then that's obviously just kind of ballparking off the top of my head. Caruso at captain with Beal, Kuzma, Westbrook, and Harrell. You have 2,100 left, and then you have to play one of Jerome Robinson, Isaac Bonga, Jordan Bell, Troy Brown, Quinn Cook. Like you have to play real crap if you're going with Caruso at captain. So
how much do you have left?
2,100 with Caruso at captain, Beal, Kuzma, Westbrook.
So you're 100 shy of Morris, 300 shy of Matthews.
It's not good. I mean, you'd have to come off Harrell, I think.
No, I'm trying to find you someone who would actually set foot on the court. That's the problem.
Okay, so all right, let's take Harrell off. We'll take Harrell off. We'll keep Kuzma, Caldwell Pope. So Caruso sets up a bunch of play. And by the way, when you guys ever wonder when we talk about setting up a story with your showdown lineups for NFL, this is it. Literally, we're reverse engineering narratives here, where LeBron has a bellyache like Steph Curry had the other day, has to go to the bathroom and leave it all on the floor there. Caruso at captain with Beal, Kuzma, Westbrook, Caldwell Pope opens up 5,100 left. And then you can get one of Gasol, Wes Matthews, Horton Tucker. It doesn't look great.
So I am going to change Kuzma into Rui Hachimura.
So Beal, Westbrook, and Rui?
Yeah.
Okay.
So and I've got KCP at the moment. So now this is where you're going to leave money on the table. But now your decision point, it becomes, is it Marc Gasol? Is it Halzino Neto? And who plays more minutes? I bet Neto plays more minutes.
And that would people in the YouTube chat keep asking about Avdia. Avdia to me mostly a play only in days where the Wizards are very depleted. Awesemo only has him in for 21 minutes. He's how cheap is he for the showdown?
So he's 3,200. So in his last 4 games, but now there's some healthy people. His last game he played 11 minutes against Portland, 21 against Denver, 20 against Houston, 28 against Boston. The problem is in the last game he took 1 shot. In the game before that he took 3. In the game before that, he took 4. So in his last 3 games of 52 minutes, he has taken 8 shots. So if he takes 1 shot every 7 minutes and Alex has him playing 21 minutes, he's going to take 3 shots tonight. I don't feel good about that.
Yeah,
I like saying Denny Avdia. It's fun. I like hearing the announcers talk about him when I watch the Wizards, but
I would honestly take Garrison Matthews over Avdia. And to be clear, I don't feel great about that either, but the Lakers do give up a higher percentage of assisted 2s and 3s more than usual. So guys who can get set up, I would give a little bit of a premium to, and that's all Garrison Matthews does is get set up. He can't really create his own shot. He'll walk into some rebounds, but that's all he does. I think he would be more in play for me, because I think there's a world where even this depleted Lakers team, like they still should be able to defend wings fairly well. They're not be able to guard the rim nearly as well. But I think maybe, you see attention being dedicated to Westbrook and Beal, and they're setting up a Matthews. I wouldn't play more than one of the shooters, though. I feel like one of Matthews, Bertans, even Rui, I feel like getting in one of those guys, you're probably losing a lot of ownership. You're getting that lineup a little bit less likely to be duped. But I think it's hard for me to imagine multiples of those guys getting there if you have Westbrook and Beal.
No, that's actually a good point there. So here I've got Caruso, Beal, Westbrook. I went upgraded to Kuzma. I'm sticking with Davis Bertans because I don't quite have enough to get Rui, and I'm going with Markieff Morris as last guy in. So then the question really becomes, if something happens to LeBron, God, I can't do Markieff.
Markieff feels very narrow. If he were starting, and we got the starting lineup too, it's sort of what would be expected here. LeBron, Caldwell Pope, Wesley Matthews, Kuzma, and Gasol. So nothing too crazy there. But if Markieff were starting, I think you can make the case. If he's not starting, you're playing a very narrow margin that I can only see getting to with like a 150.
Yeah, and now you're down to going with, my choice is Matthews versus Garrison Matthews versus Markieff. So
I think Garrison Matthews is the one that feels like it's certainly not going to be there in a projection. And Garrison Matthews, I think EMac might have mentioned this earlier, but last game didn't even play the second quarter. He just started the first half, started the second half, and didn't play the second or fourth.
If you go look at his rotation box scores, it's sad.
Yeah, it's a strange one, but maybe that's the way though with Matthews, is he gets hot early. Like I think if you're going to go to guys in this one, especially if you're playing multiple lineups, like one lineup with Matthews, one lineup with Mo Wagner, where you're trying to play the minutes game, the minutes game that people won't want to play, where they'll see 12 and a half for Matthews, 10 and change for Wagner last game. Like I think that's the only way to really get different and get value, but there's just nobody in Washington who projects that well. I think you're just sort of squinting your eyes and trying to force a narrative. I think that's probably more valuable to force a narrative than it is to force a projection. Like these guys just don't project fantastically.
All right, I've got my new one.
Joseph saying Robin Lopez is captain. That's pretty narrow stuff there, but Lopez did get to 28 minutes last game. I just feel like this isn't the spot though, where like Robin Lopez doesn't have to defend anything. He doesn't have to keep Enes Kanter off the boards like happened last game. Like that's when you see Robin Lopez really play a lot. And I think that's sort of the what gives credence to playing Mo Wagner, is that like there's just isn't going to be that dire need to get Lopez in the mix.
Just checking. We don't have, oh, here we go. The Wizards. Oh yeah, they're starting Wagner. Never mind.
Yeah. They didn't put out, they put out their actual lineup. Yeah, they're still starting Wagner.
So for those that don't know, it's Westbrook, Beal, Matthews, Hachimura, Wagner, and then the Lakers are LeBron, KCP, Matthews, Kuzma, and Gasol.
That was one of those where I was like, did I just internalize that this is what the starting lineup was going to be, or did they actually put the news out? And that is it. Our boy El Negro Loco, the news god, finally getting to rest here in a day where it doesn't seem like there'll be any news, barring, again, LeBron having the poops. That's really the main one we have to watch out for every given day. Does somebody having the poops is going to be a big problem for any NBA days.
All right. Now I got to see if I ended up on the same lineup I just built twice. Always a risk because I've made so many different changes. No, I have 3 unique lineups. So I've got 2 Caruso and 1 Wagner captain. I've got James on 2. I've got Westbrook on 2. I've got Beal on all 3. I have Kuzma on 1. I've got Gasol on 2, KCP on 2, and Matthews on 1. That's Garrison Matthews. Wagner on 2. Sorry. All right. I'm leaving nothing 700 and 900.
I'm leaving 700 and 900 on my 2 with Harrell at captain. And I feel like that's the way that I'm trying to get different from any Harrell captains that'll be out there, because I think the configuration I have is going to be pretty obvious for him.
He's the one guy I wanted to play. I don't have him on any of my 3 lineups.
Yeah, that's the thing that sucks. Like I do like you're getting Wagner in there, because I think that's like, that to me is one that has upside, and I don't have him in my 2 lineups. And I'm kind of like I like the construction. I like the idea of having Westbrook in one, Beal in the other, but I feel like not having Wagner is the one thing that scares me. And that doesn't seem like a sentence I would say normally, because the minutes are so insecure, but for a showdown, like he can be the difference very easily. And I guess, let's do another little thought exercise here, because I think this is maybe going to be helpful for some people here. You guys got 10 minutes left until the showdown locks. But here are the single-digit owned guys. And at least projected for utility single-digit ownership. We have Davis Bertans. Excuse me, he's actually a little bit higher, but I'll throw him in too. He's under 15%. Davis Bertans at 14%. Quinn Cook at 9.5%. Mo Wagner at 5.2%. Isaac Bonga at 3.7%. Alex Len at 1.8%. Do you see any of those guys? If you were to build one lineup, which one would you think is the play out of the, just try to get different, try to get that ownership product down?
There's a risk that Bonga and Len don't play.
Yeah.
Bonga probably plays for defensive purposes somehow.
But is he going to be even productive enough with a 1K salary to be useful? That's the question I would have.
Yeah. And the answer is, I don't know. They did a good job pricing these tonight.
It's a very tight showdown, which isn't always the case. And like Garrison Matthews is going to be pretty highly owned for Garrison Matthews. It's going to be 17% owned, which, it's still going to be enough. Like that still would be low owned enough for a showdown where maybe you're not chopping with everybody. But like, I think I'd rather have Mo Wagner at 5% than Garrison Matthews at 17% rounded up.
So Len has played 5 and 18 minutes in his last 2 games. The 5 was against Miami. Bonga has played in 2 of the last 4 Wizards games. Bonga has played 3 times in their last 6 games for 5, 5, and 8 minutes. Here we go. Bonga was the DNP for the 4th time in 5 games, so I missed one.
It's honestly one of these showdowns where, it's always going to be true for the most part. And I know that's something that upsets sometimes people in the YouTube chat where they're like, 150 lineups, you can get every possible combination. And it's definitely not the case. Like you can't get every possible combination, even for a showdown. But still, you're losing a lot on projections as you go. But this is one where for me, like if you're building one lineup or building a couple like EMac and I did, because we're doing the show, we don't want to throw a ton of money in just in case things get weird as they always do on these shows and during this last hour before a game starts. But I feel like this is really one where you want to have different configurations of something pretty close to the optimal and just have like, swapping in 1 or 2 pieces, like over and over again. It's not it's an interesting slate. It's a well-priced slate, but it's one that I don't think, getting super creative in a single entry lineup is going to be the move.
Yeah, this is going to be an interesting one. You really can only go with one of the big 3. That's pretty, 2 of the big 3. That's pretty cool. You could even do 1. What if if I was only doing 1? God, if the Wizards weren't playing tomorrow, I would take Westbrook as the only one.
Yeah.
Put him at captain and then I try to just stack it or get everybody else at mid-tier. Harrell would be in there, Rui Hachimura, Caruso, and then I try to figure out who else I think would be playing 4th quarter minutes for whatever scenario I was building for.
Yeah. It's only 7-point spread. So I think, that too, if you're building a single entry, like I still wouldn't want to play a blowout build. I think that's something you look at when you're even doing a max 20 or, definitely a max 150. But yeah, the chalk is going to be the chalk for a very obvious reason today, because I don't know, like I like Harrell, but I think even trying to expect him to get to 40 fantasy points, like Westbrook, Beal, and LeBron are going to get to 40 fantasy points. I'm pretty confident saying, and of course, if that goes wrong, then everything else has gone to shit in the slate. So just pretend it just didn't happen. But I would say that there really isn't anybody I even see, like Kuzma maybe has a 40 fantasy point ceiling, but like who else could even score 40 here and do it, enough times to be useful in a lineup?
So let's just do an in-game bet here. Oh, I'm on my not on my day job computer. I'm going to go log in here to the DK Sportsbook. We have this cool thing called Odds Shopper for Awesemo.
I never heard of it. Tell me more about it.
I'm going to drop this little link into chat, but Kentavious Caldwell-Pope, 10.5 over under for points. We say a 32.7% for the over, with an average win rate, or that's the ROI, the average win rate of 68%. Harrell is the average, or the odds of him getting 15.5 or more is 62%, or Wesley Matthews under 8. Do you feel better about Harrell, or do you feel better about KCP getting just 10?
I'm going to the odd shopper link now too. And
I don't have Harrell anywhere. Here's my chance to get a little money on one of my favorite players.
I mean, I feel like the ROI there, 21% projected ROI by Awesemo. And these are all new features to Odd Shopper, by the way. If you've heard us talk about it before, there's a lot of new ways to look at things and to see, to weigh whatever book you may be using out there, just to look at it analytically and figure out, what these things are relative to Awesemo's data. And yeah, Harrell, I feel really good about Harrell being a 62% probability here of getting over 15.5. Like that's what he needs. He needs a double here. And if it were over 29.5, I'd feel really good.
Wait, what is his bet?
Over 15.5 points for Harrell. Actually, let's see what his rebounds are too. Let's see if we could just reverse engineer his actual line. Harrell's over 6.5 rebounds is 61% too. So his overs for both are the profitable outcome according to Awesemo for Harrell.
All right. So, oh, come on. Now DraftKings says it can't find me.
Nick saying, I use Odd Shopper to find arbitrage on none tonight. Yeah, there's a lot of ways to make money on there, but really the ROI tool is one that I personally think is a game changer. There are a lot of sites out there you can find odds that update all that, but finding it in this package where you're also getting the ROIs and the data from Awesemo, like it's something that has the potential here to get you limited by your book pretty fast. Also to, just help hedge DFS wise. Like there's a lot of useful tools with Odd Shopper for just checking out the marketplace, seeing what's out there. Brad Levine saying, Spags, I know Gasol is your guy. I do like Gasol often projection wise. Today, though, he did not pop up for me, so that's not the case relative to his price. Pace up spot, Gasol's usage has been a little higher, but I gave him a little bit of a jump in some of the numbers, and he still wasn't getting there for me. And to be clear, a jump relative to Marc Gasol, nothing too crazy here, but he does assist a little bit more without AD out there, and Schroeder as well does rebound a little bit more, but playing in a pace-up spot is never really where I want Marc Gasol, even though it does offer up my possessions. He's just so slow and so not even out of shape, just slow and lead-footed that I feel like I don't see a ton of potential, but I wouldn't be mad if anybody threw in a Gasol lineup. I just didn't do it personally. This is a Harrell spot, by the way. That is very much a Harrell spot. Like
I know, and they've taken him off the board.
Yeah.
I'm sad, Chris. I was going to bet that.
You shouldn't have. I think Harrell's the one that could end up being a must-have that just doesn't, to me, look like he should be owned as much as he should be.
All right. Is this where I hedge and go under on KCP? I vote yes.
I think a hedge is never a bad idea. The DFS hedge, something we talk about on the tip-off show with our girl Kayla and rotating crew there, Greg, myself, Ben Rasa, Eric Lindquist. It's a fun show to check out there. To tips off before, no pun intended. Damn it, I'm always just doing this now. Tips off before the deeper dive. So watch the tip off because it tips off before the deeper dive, and that's coming up every day.
There we go. Done.
Antoine Murphy, our boy Antoine, not a big fan of playing three studs. I get it, but like, you are capping the upside. But if Wagner somehow plays 25 minutes and has a day he's capable of, that's the kind of construction that wouldn't surprise me. So I wouldn't mind your lineup, Terrence Adams. I think you're playing narrow margins, but you're playing narrow margins that still have some degree of logic to it.
All right. Oof, Wendell Carter leading the slate right now.
I did not get enough Carter. Got my
Josh Richardson, another guy I put my scale on the thumb and pushed down. He has 30.
David Nwaba's outscoring John Wall. I hate this so much.
Danwell House, your boy Danwell is
also outscoring John Wall. What happened to John Wall? I guess Levine's getting there now, but John Wall, this is his time where there's nobody else available. You should be shooting every play and assisting every play. It's unbelievable.
Oh gosh, I hate you, DFS. I hate you.
It's really this. If ever there were a slate and a show to make us feel that way here on the late slate swap and sweat, this is it. But EMac, any final thoughts here? We're locked, and I haven't eaten at all today, so I'm dying now to eat whatever is currently in the kitchen.
No, we're starting it all over again tomorrow at 6:30. Josh Engelman going to be doing The Process. And then at 10 a.m. you got the strategy show. It's going to be Josh and Laffy. And then at 3 o'clock, you got the NHL strategy show with Cliffy and Josh Harris. Behind the paywall, you have Alex with the premium stream game plan. You got the tip off I forget what time that starts, but tomorrow's matchup will be, it's going to be you and Eric Lindquist. I see Eric in the chat. Go team Eric. Deeper Dive, of course, Adam and Lofty, live before lock, Josh and Greg, and then PGA live before lock, Jason Roslin, Ben Rasa, and then just because we like to torment Spags, there will be a late slate swap.
And also, EMac, I think you just read the wrong schedule entirely, because I was like, I think I'm on live before lock tomorrow.
I read Wednesdays.
No, tomorrow's Tuesday.
Oh, I skipped the day ahead.
We were saying to our producer.
Oh my God. I thought it was going to be Wednesday. This was the longest day. Oh.
There's the example of it. But yeah, whatever EMac said, throw it out the window. But the tip-off starts at 4 p.m. Eastern tomorrow. Then you get the Deeper Dive live before lock. And I'll be on live before lock tomorrow with Terry. I'll be back on the Late Slate show tomorrow with Greg. And who knows what internet trolls he'll piss off in the interim. So tune in then. EMac, give the people your Twitter real fast. And of course, plug the Fred Van Elite too, which the contest everybody wants to play a part in.
The Fred Van Elite Fan Club is going off tonight. I set it up. It's already half full. Go see my Twitter timeline if you want to get on into that one. I will also drop the link here into chat. All you got to do is just join the DK League here, and I think that link will still work. And then you'll be notified when I launch it. It tends to fill relatively quickly, so jump on in there. And then apparently I've just didn't fall back and gain an hour. I gained a whole day. So happy it's Tuesday. Woo! My favorite acronym, Chris, my favorite acronym. Did you get that one?
Oh, I didn't. I thought you were going a different direction. I was like, I hope EMac didn't accidentally say the C word. So we like to get loose here.
So happy it's SHIT.
Either we appreciate you guys tuning in. Come back tomorrow and subscribe to the notification bell, because you are getting a TV network's amount of content coming out from the Awesemo channel tomorrow. We appreciate you guys watching. Hope you have a great showdown, and hopefully your main slate lineups are looking better than you're hoping that they do. We appreciate you guys. Have a great night. Good luck.